So where does this story go from here? Adam van Koeverden is Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Youth, and he is in Milton, Ontario. Michael Barrett, the Conservative ethics critic, and he is in Brockville, Ontario. And Charlie Angus is the NDP ethics critic. He is in Cobalt, Ontario. Mr. Barrett, first question to you. The Prime Minister was cleared by the Ethics Commissioner here. Do you acknowledge that the Prime Minister has been cleared of wrongdoing?
Look, this is the third time, the Prime Minister has been at bat with the Ethics Commissioner, and what we've seen today is a demonstration that accountability laws are broken. And in spite of today's findings, I think that the detailed and thorough report from the Ethics Commissioner really shines a light on a lot of work that needs to be done to restore Canadians' confidence in the measures that we have in place to prevent insider dealings and cronyism.
Okay, I want to ask you about the laws, Mr. Barrett, that you're speaking about, because those are laws that were put in place by a previous Conservative government. They were good enough to judge Conservative cabinet ministers at that time. Why are they not good enough now?
Well, I mean, you can look at it a couple different ways. Like I said, the Prime Minister, having been found guilty of breaking the existing laws twice, has obviously developed some skill at skirting the rules, and so the laws aren't tough enough. And it's very clear that when we have an organization that pays members of the Prime Minister's family $500,000, and that the Prime Minister is at the table and supports giving that organization $500 million, that's unacceptable. And if that is within the bounds of the rules, then the rules need to change.
Okay, so I am just reiterating these were rules that were created by a previous Conservative government, but I would also point out that the rules as they stand say that perception alone doesn't break the rules, and that's what the Ethics Commissioner found, that there was the perception of a conflict of interest, but not an actual conflict of interest. Do you acknowledge what the Ethics Commissioner found in this particular case, that it cleared the Prime Minister?
Yeah, the Ethics Commissioner has been very clear that though there was the appearance of a conflict, that the Prime Minister said he should have recused himself, that he was inside bounds. But look, that's not good enough for Canadians. We've heard for a year that this type of insider dealing is not acceptable. So the rules have to change.
Mr. Angus, I'd bring you into this conversation. Mr. Barrett says the rules need to change. If they do, what do you think they need to change to?
Well, I think what's really interesting, I was always wondering how the Ethics Commissioner was going to come down on the Prime Minister, because we know this issue of the appearance of conflict of interest. But his findings on the Finance Minister are staggering. This shows an indictment of how the Liberal government was operating, that the office of the Finance Minister in a G7 country was literally doing hustling gigs for the Koeverden brothers, calling into provincial counterparts, calling down to the municipal level. This is, I find, really the heart of the matter, and this is what we've been trying to get at for the last 10 months, was how broken was the system that the Koeverden brothers, who were not registered to lobby, were able to get such insider access through their close relations that they curated with the Prime Minister's family, but definitely with the Finance Minister, but also other key ministers, Minister Bardish Chagger, Minister Qualtrough, who were invited to WE Days, Minister Chagger, who was involved in one of the key meetings. That, I think, is what's been the really, really important work of the Ethics Commissioner. So I really welcome his findings, and I think we need to look, and I'm hoping the Liberals won't filibuster our Ethics Committee as we bring forward recommendations on the things we actually need to do to end this kind of insider access. And so if the Liberals want to filibuster, we won't get those recommendations through, but I think we've got some really good points on actually fixing some of these fundamental ethical problems.
Yeah, I want to bring Mr. van Koeverden in now. Mr. van Koeverden, this is 3 times now the Prime Minister has been investigated for ethical lapses. Mr. Morneau cost him his job, one of the most senior Liberals in government at the time, a significant blow to the government. Why should Canadians, in spite of this finding by the Ethics Commissioner, why should Canadians not find all of it has a stink?
Well, I think we're here today because the Ethics Commissioner provided a very conclusive statement. He issued the statement today that said the Prime Minister did not contravene any of the subsections or the sections of the Act He said that there's no evidence of any impropriety in relation to the Prime Minister's decision-making in this regard. And he said that he cannot conclude that any contravention of any of those rules had occurred. So really what he said lined up very, very perfectly with what the Prime Minister said in his unprecedented appearance at a committee hearing.
And the Prime Minister did acknowledge that he broke, that at the very least there was a perception issue. At the very, very least, the Prime Minister acknowledged that, the Ethics Commissioner saying that, and saying he should have recused himself from something he ultimately did not do. So why should Canadians now have faith that the Prime Minister's judgment would be better next time?
Well, I think we need to look at why we were trying to make these decisions and why we were hurrying through and trying to find services for Canadians, specifically in this case for young Canadians and students, because there were so many, students that were left out of some of the programs and students that ordinarily would have worked on patios and worked at camps and worked in childcare and in sports programs that didn't have jobs last year. And this was that effort that we put forth. And admittedly, it didn't go as well as we had planned, and there were problems with it. The Prime Minister acknowledged those. The Prime Minister acknowledged the wrongdoing if there was, that lapse in judgment. But what the Ethics Commissioner said was that he was very, very satisfied that he didn't give that's the Prime Minister, didn't give any sort of preferential treatment. That the decisions that he made in the matter were not influenced by anybody else. And that's the conclusive statement that came out today.
Mr. Van Koeverden, I do just want to ask you, because Mr. Barrett is among many, certainly within the Conservative Party, saying that these rules, these ethics rules, need to change and there need to be stronger fines. Is that something that the Liberals support?
Well, Mr. Barrett is a member of the Ethics Committee, and I'm not. So if they would like to have a study on that, I suppose that's their prerogative. But I would, again, remind him that these are rules that the previous government, the previous Conservative government, under the guise of Stephen Harper, put into place. And these are the rules. You can't change the rules halfway through the game and expect better results. And I just want to reiterate again with this set of rules, a perception of a conflict of interest is not a conflict of interest.
So let me go to Mr. Barrett there. What kind of fines, what kind of consequences should there be?
Well, look, when we have the front bench on the government side, Finance Minister, the Prime Minister, who have previously been found of unmitigated breaches of the act, of breaking this law, and no substantive monetary fine. I think if we had $25,000 fines, that might make some people blink. That might give some weight behind it. But also, we need to prevent people from breaking the rules to begin with. As it stands right now, people could drive a truck through the loopholes or the exceptions that allow them to have unfettered access, insider access to the corridors of power. And
again, on rules the Conservatives wrote. These are loopholes a truck driving through on a law on rules written by a Conservative government.
Perhaps the Conservatives underestimated the lengths that a future Liberal Prime Minister would go to get around the rules. But here we are. We've seen the lengths they'll go to, and now we recognize the rules need to be tougher. And I think that that's something that everyone should be able to get behind.
Okay, I want to put your suggestion of $25,000 fines to Mr. Angus. Mr. Angus, is that something that you believe is needed and you would support?
Well, let's just step back. Just for the viewers to actually know what was talked about today, there was a massive finding of guilt. The findings of guilt on the finance minister were very damning, and how the finance minister's office and other key ministerial staff were used to promote the Kielburgers. That was a finding of guilt. I'm not all that interested in the financial penalties right now. What we need to ask is, why was there no conflict of interest screen at Cabinet? Zero. None. That put the Prime Minister in a conflict, in a very clear, apparent conflict. Why was Bill Morneau was able to hustle gigs for someone who they called his bestie, with nobody in the department saying that was a problem? So we need to look at how the conflict of interest screens are used, not just in the finance minister's office, but in all the ministers' offices. This was a major, major breach of public trust that led to a $900 million boondoggle, and it goes back to the fact that a group that were not registered to lobby had insider access that no other group had, and that's what the findings were today. I think that this really, the Ethics Commissioner's findings could be a roadmap for how we need to actually clean up Ottawa, but I don't think you're going to find that under this present Prime Minister.
Okay, we're going to have to leave the discussion. Thank you, all three of you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.